everybody wants to know what the next step is or what they can focus on or how something works, especially first responders. You know, they want to know as much as information as they can for the battle that they're going to be going into, whether it be a fire or up against a patient or, a police altercation. Like, they want to know about everything that they can in a situation where you don't get to know what's going to happen. So psychedelic journeys are much like that. It's going to be controlled chaos.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kristin Barnes. Welcome back to the Alternative Flight Plan podcast. This is where we talk about the healing paths that your conventional medical provider might not tell you about or even know about. We're all into finding creative solutions to complex problems, which is so critical in healthcare and chronic disease today. I have stepped out of the ready room and into the treatment room to share some of these with you. And my guest today is Angela Skudin, and we're going to dive into all things alternative today. Angela is the founder and CEO of the 343 Fund, an organization dedicated to providing resources and the opportunity for healing to first responders. She has her own interesting journey of coming back from chronic illness. And I really want to dive into that with her today. But she also now brings that same opportunity to her community. Angela is driven by the legacy of her husband, Casey, who was a 16-year veteran of FDNY. And Casey tragically passed away in an accident. However, Angela carries forward his dedication to other first responders with the work at the 343 Fund. So without further ado, strap into your ejection seat. It's time to taxi to the catapult and get airborne. Angela, welcome. It's awesome to have you here.
Thanks so much for that introduction. It's great to be here with you. We're talking about my favorite thing to talk about, and that's finding an alternative path through healing when you've been told there is no direction. So happy to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah. I mean, if it's one thing I hear from my patients is I've tried everything and nobody has any answers for me. But I believe for everything there is an answer. Anyway, let's get started in our conversation today. I would love to hear a little bit more about your personal journey with alternative medicine and how that kind of informed where you are today. So just how did you find alternative medicine?
I exhausted all of my Western medicine options and ran out of money. I think that's the road to most people's alternative medicine journeys, at least in the United States, that is. So I grew up, just going to the doctor and when I was sick and they gave me a prescription and I went home and, 1 week later, 30 days later, whatever, 24 hours later, I was going to feel better when I took whatever was in that bottle. And I took that mentality with me forward my whole life in healing. And if I needed orthopedically from sports, if I needed a surgery, you get a surgery. And then you do your PT and you get back down the road. And that wasn't working for me. I was 39 years old, 38 or 39. And I kind of hit a wall and my immune system just plummeted, and I ended up getting what I like to call like the straw that broke the camel's back. I tore all of the ligaments in the top of my left foot, or whatever was up there, and I just started a cascade of breakdowns in my entire system. So as part of that, I eventually ended up getting misdiagnosed, and then had to find a way through to find answers. And it was a very fast paced way through. I feel like I fast tracked everything. Most people are stuck in what I had going on for years. I ended up having Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella, relapsing fever, Borrelia, mold toxicity, Morgellons disease, heavy metal poisoning. And it just kind of affected every system in me, from neurological to my thyroid, my heart, gynecologically. They suspected I had endometriosis. However, my white blood cell count was too low and I was too weak for them to go in and even do the diagnostic to determine that. So I exhausted everything. I was costing my family thousands of dollars per week for treatments, and offered surgery and opioids. and it wasn't answering. The surgeries weren't answering why I had pelvic pain. Back surgery wasn't going to fix that. So I found a compound called Iboga, somehow, some way, and my 2 choices were to try Iboga for $1,500 after I had already I was it was $5,000 a week just for one of my treatments at that point. I had a PICC line in my arm, and I was getting, IVs of antiparasitics and antibiotics 5 days a week, backed by glutathione and stuff like that, but there's not enough glutathione in the world to do gut repair when you're getting that much stuff in you. So, I had a hard mountain to climb just from the remedy from Western medicine. I was killing my body, and the brain gut function was being absolved at that point in time. And my 2 choices were to go to Germany, be put in a coma, and get a fever of 107.5 degrees. And hopefully that would kill some of the things that I had and I wouldn't die. And that would cost me, I think it was $80,000 at the time. Or for $1,500, have some dude from California come, and I was going to eat this root bark called Iboga from Gabon, Africa. And there would be a chance that, I could get my life back from that. This was way before, the special forces people were talking about it, before it was like a household name. But I think the important thing to remember during all of this is like Iboga, even though it's this hot item thing for veterans, and I know you yourself are a veteran, it's for everybody. Like I was a mom in Long Beach, New York, a business owner, a mom, just participating in life, and with all of these things I couldn't get rid of. And Iboga is for me. It's also for a tribe of people called the Bwiti and Gabon, Africa. It's for them too. So a lot of times just thinking something's not for you keeps you from freeing yourself. And I like to mention that when we're talking, that this is a substance that can help not only addicts and veterans and first responders, but it can help bring peace to moms like me and first responder wives, and also people like my 77-year-old father who just sat with a substance with Iboga, with Ibogaine, which comes from Iboga, a few weeks ago to absolve himself of his anger issues. And it was the first time he ever used a psychedelic in his life. So it's becoming a household name. And I think conversations like this are important so people know there's alternatives and ways out.
So you said so many things that I want to go back to. Let's start with, because this one might be the most interesting, the Morgellons. Like, how many people told you were crazy?
Oh my God. Back then,
Yeah.
everybody, except for one doctor that I found. I actually got diagnosed with Morgellons clinically in office with a with a microscope. I'm not sure what they call the tool, where she was able to look into the sores that I at that time had all over my body from head to toe. And for people not familiar with it, Morgellons is a disease. I love this one. It's diagnosed as delusions of parasitosis, but the treatment for it is a prescription for an antiparasitic, and an antipsychotic. So
Oh my God. I've actually seen a patient with this before. And so I did a deep dive into, because everybody had told him he was crazy. And when he sat down and we started chatting, I admit it, he sounded crazy. But then I started looking into it. I'm like, I think this is real. And I wonder how many people out there are being told they're crazy when they have a real thing, which goes back to the misdiagnosis. Like, how many years were you misdiagnosed before you finally got something that you could work on?
I mean, if we want to get to the nitty-gritty of it, since I'm 11 years old, I was lactose intolerant out of nowhere. And, that just doesn't happen. So, yeah, I think we're misled a lot. I think a lot of times, like, the diet, the conventional diets that we eat, and the way that we eat, and the amount of processed foods and stuff, I'm gonna let you know that that was contributing a lot to my conditions as well, and helps me now avoid the doctor. I mean, we were taught for so long, you are what you eat. That was just always inbred into us, and we truly are. And food can really help with that. And through my journey, I learned a lot about that. And ignorance, you can't be faulted for. You don't know what you don't know. And I'm just really grateful to know what I know now through my journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't often see patients quite as complex as you, but I every once in a while somebody will pop up on my radar. But between Morgellons, mold, and Lyme, like those are three of the hardest things I can think of for one person to deal with all at the same time.
Yeah, I got told by one doctor that was treating me on the East Coast. He said, "Well, you're the worst case I've ever seen." And I thought, "Well, great. I hate hearing that sentence, but I love a challenge." So, climbing back from what I climbed back from too, it helps so much now when you say, "Oh, how many people thought you were crazy?" It doesn't even matter to me anymore who thought I was crazy. I was living in a mental and physical torture in my body, and just because the doctor in front of me didn't know what was wrong with me, I wasn't about to let them gaslight me into believing that what was happening to me wasn't happening to me and that it was delusional. So, the other thing that I found out during that time was that the majority of the women that were getting, or the people that were getting diagnosed with these diseases were, with Morgellons in particular, were women that were in my category, that had health insurance, that could go see a doctor. And then, these people, these women, anybody, you know, until maybe fairly recently that gets diagnosed with Morgellons or just investigated it. I mean, there's a huge stigma on that still. But I started just researching the heck out of it because I need to become an expert in what's wrong with me, not what's wrong with the rest of the world. And I found that there was this doctor working at Oklahoma State University in the veterinary school there, and he had done the most research on Morgellons disease through that. And what I found out was there weren't a lot of people looking into this, and that every animal and plant compound on the planet that they had tested to try to identify what the things were that were in the people's skin and when what manifests in Morgellons disease, they couldn't relate it to any plant or animal. So it's something, that we've never seen before, and nobody likes to say that they don't know, especially a doctor. But I fortunately went to doctors that were brave enough to say, "Hey, I don't know, and let me know when you find out. I feel like you're going to." And I was one of the people that got to find out what was wrong with me and fix it. So there's a lot of people in my category, that die by suicide, though, that don't ever fix
It's
it.
not shocking. Yeah, it's not a stretch. I I had an instructor, a professor in med school that we were talking about stuff like this, and she says, "You know what happens? You know what you do when somebody comes in and you tell them they tell you a crazy story?" And as students were thinking, "Oh, well, they're crazy," and she said, "No, you believe them." Like, they know their own experience better than you do, and how about you take a moment to actually listen to what's going on before you start judging their experience? And that's a really important lesson to open up the opportunity for curiosity and creativity.
Well, I think that makes the better doctor, right? Or the better anything, the better teacher, the better mentor, anything, something that instead of just accepting a diagnosis or when I Google Morgellons disease and I look at it, that's not what I had, you know? But and I don't know that I've gotten entirely rid of it. I'll tell you the truth about that. I haven't been sick in years. I would say since I started bee venom therapy, which is something that I did a protocol of that for 15 months to rid myself, under the thought process that your body regenerates every cell. So I kind of call it like my octopus theory. We're these sophisticated machines, and if I'm going to be regenerating cells, then I'm gonna break down the ones that are bad and good, and then I'm gonna rebuild ones that I know aren't immune compromised or really helping my system, and I found that through bees, through bee venom therapy. And as long as you're not allergic, you can endure something like that. It's quite painful, but it freed me, along with psychedelics, and I haven't seen a doctor since. I haven't been I mean, I see doctors. I go get my blood work checked, check my hormones regularly. I believe in medicine, and I believe in Western medicine too. If I get in a car accident, you better believe I'm gonna go to the hospital and get treated with Western modalities, or if I need heart surgery or something, but
Yeah.
until then, I'm going to investigate the plants and the stuff that
Hmm.
our creator gave us here on God's green earth.
I love it. I have not heard of the treatment of putting somebody in a coma and jacking their body temperature up to 107. I can see the mechanism of action behind that, but charging somebody $80,000, I mean, wow. I, I,
It was
anyway,
crazy.
yeah.
And then you sign a
I,
waiver too that says like, oh, hey, you might not make it out. And at the time, I think my son was like 6 years old. And I thought, well, I can't sign this. And then it said that over half of the things that I had, it couldn't absolve. So it just wasn't an option for us. So then I chose the Iboga. And let me tell you, I reference this a lot because people have judgment on how people get healed. But I would have walked through a house on fire to get out of the pain that I was in. And I absolved everything that I found available to me. So I try to leave people's, I don't look at the car or the car that they rode in coming to the party. I'm just happy they made it to the party. And I feel like more people need to take their human judgments on how people find their healing paths and just be happy that people survived through what they survived through and are sharing their story, because I would never recommend doing Iboga in your living room, with some dude from California. But I would recommend it in a safe, supported environment with pre and post journey care and proper medical screening.
Totally. I had forgotten, you and I talked first, it's been a couple months now, and I had forgotten that you did Iboga. I've done it twice myself. So I understand the experience, and yeah, it almost felt like walking through a house on fire to get through to the other side. That whole,
But well
yeah.
worth it, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
burns don't stay. So that's
Uh,
the good news.
That is temporary. I'm interested because what I know about Iboga is focused on traumatic PTSD and brain injury in veterans and first responders. This is the first I've heard of it curing or setting up the body to heal from complex chronic disease like you have. What do you attribute that to?
So they don't know how it works, and there's been limited studies on it. But what we have found is that it allows for neuroplasticity to occur. So it's going to allow for new thought patterns. So I believe that part of healing is being trapped in our stories. So if I'm telling myself I'm sick, I'm never going to heal, nothing's going to help me. These doctors said I'm going to have this forever, or I have to do daily antibiotics for 5 to 9 years, like they said. I'm telling myself the truth. So if I open the ability to have new thought patterns and new possibilities, then I can tell myself the truth in a different manner through a different lens. And that was what happened for me. And I got the ability to sleep unassisted without taking a Xanax, without taking a drink of alcohol, without taking a Tylenol PM, magnesium pill, melatonin, chamomile tea, you name it. I didn't need anything to sleep for the first time in my life after I had an Iboga journey. And all that happened during that journey, I saw nothing. Nothing. And I puked like I've never puked in my life for hours. Okay. And I
I get
victimized
that.
myself
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
just telling myself, oh my God, this didn't work, blah, 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 blah. And that night I went to sleep. And I've slept every single night of my life without any of the modalities I mentioned earlier. And for so many years of my life, I'm going to say since I was 14 years old, I've lived in a thought pattern of A, B, C, D, and what I'm going to do if those things don't work, all the way down to Z. And my mind could never rest. And for the first time in my life, I have the ability to rest my mind. Does that happen for everybody? No. But every person I've seen go through this journey, and by the end of this year, we'll have more than 170 first responders will have served through this journey, walked with them through this journey, every single person is better, no matter what. I've never, even if someone wants to stay in their stuck story, and they're better, they're still better, because this does something that no other compound on the planet does. And it allows for healing on a cellular level that we do not know. And it has regrown white matter in people's brains at TBI sites, and there's scientific study of that. And we should all be allowed to have access to this for our greater healing. So if nothing else, when you go for an Iboga and Ibogaine journey, I think your longevity on you're taking 1.37 years off of your brain age, they say. So yeah, I've gotten a lot of peace from it. It's helped me sleep every night of my life, including the night my husband died. I was able to say, there's nothing you can do for yourself but sleep. And my body obeyed. My mind obeyed, I should say.
It is a pretty magical medicine. I did 2 sessions in 1 week, and I came out a completely different person, which is part of the reason I'm sitting here talking to you today, because before that I would have, my own belief patterns would have prevented that. I love what you said before about, number one, this is for everybody. And number two, people should have access. It's very frustrating to sit and see the power of this stuff and not be able to give it to people.
As a doctor, how does that make you feel? Like that, that that you live in a country, where there's a substance out there that your patients can't have access to.
I'll tell you what it does is it makes me get involved in organizations like the 343 Fund to share it and to talk about it all the fucking time. So what a great segue. Tell me about the 343 Fund.
The Casey Skudin 343 Fund. I started this shortly after my husband passed away. My husband, Casey Skudin, was my best friend in life and the best person that I've ever met, and he helped save so many people during his 16 and a half year career as a New York City member of the FDNY. He was also part of their mentor and mentee program with the FDNY and a member of their surf rescue. He also was a fitness advocate, a triathlete, an ocean lifeguard, a CrossFit coach, and my best friend. So when he passed away, we were in a terrible accident together where I had a near-death experience, and he unfortunately didn't make it through. And I just couldn't let his life saving. And so I took his life insurance policy in total, and I 100% donated it to saving first responders' lives. And I built an organization that had everything that I felt I needed and didn't have when I was going through my psychedelic journeys, including for my family and just for my own information. And I built a pre and post journey support program with safe access to psychedelic facilities. And I've been dedicating my time to that service since we sent our first group in May of 2023. And as I mentioned before, by the end of this year, we'll have sent over 170 first responders through for treatment. So my husband continues to save lives in his legacy, and I'm very proud to be able to give that to the first responder community, to our first responder community.
That's amazing. I love supporting veterans, but I think supporting veterans is pretty sexy these days. And there's a whole, I have some first responders in my family and in my network, my friend group, and I watch them deal with stuff that as a veteran, I never had to deal with. Like it's trauma on a daily basis that just never ends for an entire career. One of the things that I love about your program is that it's not just psychedelics. Can you talk a little bit more about the alternative stuff that you've mixed into this big salad?
As part of our program, one thing that I found, and if we could heal with psychedelics, a lot of people would just be healed, after going to a Grateful Dead show, and they're in college or whatever. So that was something that I knew wasn't doing it. The psychedelics, the medicine itself isn't the the cure, you know? So what's the cure? And I've just believed that the medicine is a catalyst for the cure. It's just the allowance for the segue of it. And um, we provide a supportive container that kind of allow the onion to be peeled back for the authenticity to be there. And then people find these deep healings from childhood trauma. um, 54% of our community is actually veterans. So there's a big spillage over from the veteran community to the first responder community. We give our grant recipients a coach for an entire year. A coach isn't a therapist. You know, they're not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Some are, but most aren't. They're just somebody who's played the game and they can tell you where to best position yourself on the field. So, that said, some of their grant recipients will go through for a first time psychedelic journey, and then they'll continue. You know, they'll go access ketamine or some MDMA therapy, something that their insurance will cover in the United States, and then or psilocybin therapy through a program in Oregon or something like that. And then we can provide them with a psychedelic integration coach, the same one that they've already had a previous relationship with. So we provide them this container, and then we have every night of the week, we have something going on except for Friday night. It's either an informational session, pre and or post journey integration for groups that haven't gone and groups that have gone. And then we take the individual units and bond them together for pre and post journey care, so that they have, we like to call it their war buddies for when they're going through their journeys. So it's a big container of support for the family members and for the individual grant recipients going through. We also help them through. A lot of them are detoxing off of SSRIs and alcohol. You know, we use a lot of social tools to get us through things like kratom and alcohol and things that you can't be on before you show up for a psychedelic journey. So we will help them after they get their detox schedules from their prescribing practitioners, by just giving them what we like to call a journey buddy, somebody who's walked that walk and had to detox off of those things themselves and made it through on the other side so that they have additional support. Because the most dangerous time for our grant recipients is the detox period between when they fill out a grant application and when they access that medicine.
Well, it's got to be a lot for them, not just physically, but emotionally in terms of detoxing from something that's been in your body for a while and then detoxing away from the idea that you still need it.
Yeah, that's all of the above. So it's a real mental and physical torture for people, and we just like to make sure that they know that there's an end to their suffering. And that's kind of how I get people to be brave and go through psychedelic journeys is, hey, right now, there's no end to your suffering, which is most people we deal with have suicidal ideations or plans for suicide. If this doesn't work, I'm going to do this. And I say, well, we've got one more thing to try, right? Which that automatically gives somebody hope. Okay, that's a lifeline. One more thing to try is a reason to stay alive. So we give people one more thing to try.
And it's not just one more thing. Like giving somebody false hope can be really, really cruel. And I think a lot of people don't want to get hope because they've had their hopes dashed so many times. But the track record for some of these substances is such that I don't think I think it's a worthwhile hope.
Yeah, that I can confidently say to everybody, oh, I'm not giving you false hope in this regard. Just because, yeah, and what you said so important because getting false hope is something that happens all the time, especially when people are battling things chronically and they've been told so many times that this is the way out and it wasn't, it was just a dead end. But this is a light at the end of the tunnel. And there's a lot that goes into not just taking a pill and thinking I'm going to wake up healed or cured. That's just not how this works. But through a introspective tour of a person's self-love journey, they can start to have that healing happen. And then tools like alcohol or Adderall or pain meds are just not choices anymore. They just drop off. And tools like meditation or breath work or contrast therapy, those become the things that we want to choose for our dopamine rushes. And those are the new patterns that we can start working with that have a positive impact in our life rather than a negative one.
Yeah. Well, another thing I love about your organization is you guys sent me the manual, and I thought that veterans were very, on and organized. And oh my God, it's the best manual I've seen yet. And I can only imagine that when folks sign up for you and they're emotionally invested, that's part of what gets the results is having something they can follow and do something that feels concrete.
Yeah, we're really proud of our manual. We took a long time to write it from a trauma-informed first responder perspective. We're working on another manual for our friends and family so that it can so all inclusivity, we said at the beginning of this that this is for everyone, and we just want to make sure that we have a container of support for everybody that we bring to the table. But inside that manual, yeah, everybody wants to know what the next step is or what they can focus on or how something works, especially first responders. You know, they want to know as much as information as they can for the battle that they're going to be going into, whether it be a fire or up against a patient or, a police altercation. Like they want to know about everything that they can in a situation where you don't get to know what's going to happen. So psychedelic journeys are much like that. It's going to be controlled chaos, and first responders are used to controlled chaos. So we try to give them a roadmap or what is within their control. And one of the things that is within all of our control is our breath. So it's the thing we're granted upon entry and it leaves upon exit. So if you can learn how to use your breath, you can balance your parasympathetic nervous system in less than 30 seconds. And we oftentimes introduce people to the breath for the first time, or we engage them in a breathwork practice that they can arm themselves with, no matter where they are, to help their anxiety.
Um, a lot of the people that I've talked to in the veteran community are still reticent to try something that seems as out there as psychedelics. I'm curious what the culture is like with first responders, and how open is the community to doing stuff like this?
I'm laughing because, yeah, it's crazy. Because, like, right now, we have an FBI agent. He's retired, but he's going through our program, and I just giggle. Well, there's a moral injury portion that exists for police officers going through our program. And then, there's also just the fact that, hey, they've been taught drugs are bad. So the first thing I like to talk about is Ibogaine is on currently the Scheduled 1 controlled substance list in the United States of America federally, which means by definition that it must be addictive and it must have no benefit, right? So we already know what we know. You don't know what you don't know, but we know what we know now. And the Medical Research Limited has already canceled out both of those facts. And the way it got on that list was political rivalry during the Nixon administration on a smear campaign. So, right now, the American Ibogaine Initiative, Brian Hubbard and Rick Perry and team are going state to state and working really hard to right this wrong and get us the more medical studies and funding. And that's what we're going to do here in the United States of America. But I think it's come to a point where our community is mad. They're mad that they're finding out that there's these things out there that can reprieve them from their suffering, and their departments are putting roadblocks in the way, and their government is putting roadblocks in the way on ignorance. So we're working really hard to change that. Like I said, we have peer support communities inside 343, and we like to team them up with buddies that have been through their journey, and 54% of our community that we serve is active duty. So, yeah, like we're here to provide safe access. And when I say to a man, "Are you worried about the moral injury portion of this?" And he says, "I'm not going to be around to collect my pension because I'm going to put a bullet in my head." I think it's pretty clear that we need to start helping these guys and these ladies that are helping us, you know, preserve our communities and help them get out of their suffering.
Yeah. Um, if this stuff is going to be available for everyone, one of the concerns I have is something a little bit like you described, where somebody has somebody come over to the living room and give them an IV with Ibogaine, which is not really an ideal situation. So you don't do that. You put a lot of time and energy into choosing where you send folks. What goes into that?
Well, a lot of research and then testing it out ourselves. So, most people in our organization have gone through the journey ourselves. For me, going to Tijuana, Mexico, and to an Ibogaine clinic, that's just a regular day. That's not scary to me. Crossing the border is not scary, but we have been told all of these stories, with the limited access that we have to the real world. And when I was growing up, I was certainly told that Tijuana, Mexico was not a place that I should be going. I have been to many places in Mexico for both pleasure and business, but I've never been to any other place besides more than I've been to Tijuana, Mexico. I have never felt unsafe there. The standard of care in Mexico for their nurses and doctors is light years ahead of the United States. I've never seen patient care like I've witnessed in Tijuana, Mexico. So, I think that a lot of it is just the fear of the unknown here. And, yeah, so going through and making sure that these clinics are safe. We use Ambio Life Sciences down in Tijuana, Mexico, and um, Trevor Miller and Jonathan and Jose and team just all really have kept all of our people safe. And I trust them and their medical staff. When I go and witness a journey, I witness a doctor standing for hours, staring at every single screen, and then getting on his hands and knees with a tissue when one of the participants is purging to wipe the spit from the corner of his mouth. And I just don't see that, when I'm witnessing doctors in the United States. It's not the nurse doing it, it's the doctor. So yeah, it's just knowing that people are running a tight ship, their track records are good. Those are the people that we work with.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's part of the smear campaign for us to think that Mexico is somehow this third world country that has no clue about how to take care of people.
I
Right.
mean, I'm just saying.
Just saying. The last time we had a board meeting, you mentioned that your dream is to have a place in San Diego. And boy, I perked up when I heard that. Tell us a little bit more about what your long-term vision is for 343.
Well, so my long-term vision, and I don't know if it would be, where it'll be, but it'll be near wherever clinics are. I would love to have a pre and post journey support house for 343 where people can, you're not going to a hotel, or going to dinner out. When people are detoxing off alcohol or drugs or other pharmaceuticals or SSRIs, and they're suffering and they're having suicidal ideations and anxiety, and they're miserable in life, they don't want to go to a hotel. They don't want to go out to dinner. They want a safe, supported container. So I'd like to have a house eventually where the first responders come, and then they go there pre-journey, and then they come back post-journey. And they have a few days or, however long they need. Maybe they have a week, depending on what they have. But they have a little bit of time between the treatment and back home. So, yeah, and then the people that go through the program can come and work the house, and it can just kind of replicate a firehouse environment, with the kitchen table and everybody kind of cooks together. And Yeah, my dream is to just have a community for first responders that has nothing to do with psychedelics per se. It has to do with like pre and post journey support and care for people, for the first responders. So one day, if we get enough donations, donate now. The 343fund.org.
We'll get to that part. It can't be overstated that, I've done a number of psychedelic journeys throughout the last 3 years or so, and some I've done better than others. I have noticed that the longer I do this, the more time I need afterwards, and I'm taking less. So having that space to just decompress, and number one, figure out what the fuck just happened, right? You just went into this thing and now you've got a couple days, but to figure out what you want to do going forward once you get back home and you're back into your old environment.
Yeah, and a lot of our people, they're doing this on days off from work. So we'll have people that go right back into the belly of the beast, being police chiefs or firefighters, just right back into it again. So yeah, there's definitely a noticing post journey where people need to have some space for themselves. That's not always available to everybody because the real world gets in the way. But I would like to remove as many parameters as possible for people, for first responders to be able to do that. And with first responders, a lot of times it's financial. I'm so sick of hearing other people when it comes to first responders say, "Oh, I pay your bills," or "You have great insurance." Because when I was a first responder's wife and we had health insurance through the FDNY, nothing that I needed for my care was covered by traditional health insurance. And we were living paycheck to paycheck. A first responder's life is not a life of luxury. They're doing a public service and they earn every dollar they get. But yeah, there's a stigma out there that they're so well paid for and provided for that their communities support them. But that's not entirely the case, and certainly not everywhere.
Boy, we could go off an entire podcast about that subject. I've seen too many sailors and Marines that live below the poverty line, and they're out there on the front lines doing the thing that nobody else wants to do. Let's circle back real quick because I didn't want to miss the opportunity. Tell me about the saunas.
Okay, so there was a study done after 9/11 where they brought saunas into ground zero and they let firefighters access this post, cleanup. And all of the firefighters that had sauna care fared better post 9/11, all of them. So I employed saunas in my protocol. I say if you can't do anything to heal, and I couldn't even stand through a shower at times when I was suffering. I would have to sit down and take a break and then stand back up and finish rinsing off my body. But I could sit in a sauna and I could sweat. So if you can't exercise and you can't detox, you can sit in a sauna. So you can get a sauna for like $345 on Amazon. One you can just zip yourself up in, and then you can go all the way you can. So if you're suffering and sick and you need to detox, get one. And we started putting them in firehouses, and we've put them in, I think, 4 of the 5 rescues for the FDNY, contrast therapy, either a sauna and a cold plunge or a sauna, and one of the squads and a couple of the regular FDNY houses, as just something that we could do to say, hey guys, thanks for going into all these toxic environments. Sorry that the FDNY doesn't even pay to wash your clothes, but we're going to get you guys a sauna, which frankly, I think every department in the country should have a sauna in firehouses for these men and women to go in there and get these chemical toxins out of their body with the research that we have for sauna care. So I don't know if our little spiel right here will make a difference, but it's something really easy people can do to help out departments. It's hard to help the police. We haven't had any police departments that actually allowed us to help them.
Well, it's something that I talk about frequently. In fact, when I had a conversation with my buddy John, who I put in contact with you, he was a survivor of 9/11 and never heard of that study. And he's suffering from a lot of things. And I'm like, what do you mean you've never heard of this study? Get a sauna, man. And it's intense, like the L. Ron Hubbard protocol is intense, but you can still just do basic saunas to get the crap out of your system. This is where the doctor in me says, make sure you stay well hydrated and do your electrolytes. But yeah, like saunas, it's not free, like you have to buy the sauna, but if you have access to one, or you get into a hot bath and you just sweat it out, but that's awesome.
I also wanted to mention too, if people suffering from mold toxicity, that it's really hard to detox mold out of your system, mold and fungus, but your skin is the biggest organ you have, and it's the easiest way to detox, and it's very often overlooked. So I got really picky with my skin after I started a sauna detoxing protocol as far as taking care of what was going to go in and out of my body through that pathway. And I got a lot, especially with Morgellons disease. If you people can get in a sauna, it can really help get all that stuff out. I still employ a sauna protocol now for my detox to this day, and I always will.
It's an ongoing thing. It's like something that you should do for the rest of your life. Like, as long as we're on planet Earth and exposed to the stuff that we are, it doesn't matter if your water's clean, you still need to detox.
Well, and the science too for your cardiac health with saunas is, what is that? You have an increase. It's, what is it, 40%?
I don't know the exact number, but
I think you better your cardiac health by at least 40% if you employ the use of a sauna 3 days a week for 15 minutes. Like, that's nothing, sweating for 15 minutes, and you can do that for your heart. And right now, the number one cause of death in this country, the last time I checked, was heart disease. So get a sauna.
Do yourself a favor. Yes, exactly. Yeah. All right. We are at the end of our time. I've really enjoyed talking to you and getting reacquainted with a lot of your story. I believe greatly in the work that you're doing. If somebody wants to support 343, how can they do that? How can they find you?
On our website, the 343fund.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. Ours is Casey Skudin 343 Fund. And feel free to donate, fill out a grant application. We could really use donations. It costs about $10,000 to save a first responder's life through our program. And I think that's a deal.
It is a deal. Like, that person's still on planet Earth, and not only are they still on planet Earth, but they're healthy and they're vital and they're contributing to their community. So that's worth it. Yeah.
The last thing I want to say is I got a text message from a first responder that had been suffering from a TBI. And I saw him get off a CPAP machine from one Iboga journey. It opened up all his nasal passageways. He wasn't expecting that. And I said, "How are you feeling?" And he said, "Not just physically, but emotionally, I'm feeling the way I felt before I even became a police officer." And, I'd like to give that sense of freedom to every first responder.
God, that's awesome. I'm actually getting goosebumps. All right. I love this work. Okay. So you know how to find Angela and the 343 team. If you're in Washington State and you want medical care with me, I do telemedicine, or you can come see me in Port Townsend, www.meridianpassagewellness.com. I can also be found in Paulsbo with Element 7, and I'm on all social medias. So if you like what you listened to here today, consider donating, help out, and like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate anything that you can do to share the message about alternative healthcare and the stuff that folks like Angela are doing with the 343 Fund. So thanks very much, Angela. Any last parting words before we close out the session?
No, just help us save the savers. Donate 343fund.org.
Yeah. As I say every episode almost, thank you for your service and how can I help? So thanks very much for listening. That's all we have time for today. So we're going to bring it into the pattern and come back for an OK 3-wire and have a slider at mid-rats. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.